In October 2023, a Kentucky lawsuit forced TikTok to unseal hundreds of pages of internal company documents. And what they revealed was worse than anyone expected. The files proved that TikTok's own researchers had measured, tracked, and reported the addictive effects of the platform on teenage users, and executives had read those reports and pushed forward anyway. For years, TikTok's public position was simple. We build engaging experiences, and like any form of entertainment, moderation is up to the user. They testified before Congress that teen safety was a top priority. They launched campaigns about digital well-being. But the documents tell a very different story. They show a company that understood the psychological mechanisms of addiction, deployed them deliberately on the most vulnerable users, and built legal strategies around the inevitable fallout. Most coverage of TikTok and teen mental health has focused on anecdotal evidence or external studies. But these internal files pull back the curtain on what the company knew, when they knew it, and what they chose to do with that knowledge. We are going to walk through 6 findings from these documents, and by the end, you will understand exactly how a platform engineers compulsive use in adolescent brains. We will cover what their own research showed about addiction metrics, how they tested these features specifically on teens, and why executives made the conscious choice to prioritize engagement over safety. This is not speculation. This is what TikTok wrote down when they thought no one was watching. Let's start with the testing protocols because that is where the intent becomes impossible to deny. In March 2021, internal presentation to TikTok's growth team outlined results from A/B tests conducted exclusively on users aged 13 to 15. The feature being tested was a modification to the For You page algorithm that reduced the gap between dopamine hits. Specifically, engineers shortened the interval between highly engaging videos to create what the document called tighter reward cycles. The presentation included charts showing that the modified algorithm increased daily session length by an average of 41 minutes in the teen cohort, compared to just 8 minutes in adult users over 25. Think about what that means for a second. TikTok did not stumble into this data. They actively ran experiments where they showed one group of teenagers a standard feed and another group a modified feed engineered to be more habit-forming, and then they measured the difference. The results were not close. Teens in the test group opened the app 2.3 times more frequently and spent nearly an extra hour per day scrolling. According to notes in the appendix, one engineer flagged concerns about outsized effects on younger cohorts, but the feature was rolled out globally 6 weeks later. The same presentation that documented the addiction spike recommended expanding the test to 12-year-olds in markets where age verification was weak. That should already be raising questions about liability, but it gets significantly darker when you see what TikTok was actually measuring on the back end. Because they did not just track total time on the app, they tracked something much more revealing. TikTok's internal analytics distinguished between 2 metrics: total session time and time well spent. Both numbers appeared in executive dashboards reviewed every week. Total session time is self-explanatory. It is how long a user keeps the app open. But time well spent was TikTok's own measure of what they considered healthy engagement, defined in an internal memo from August 2020 as active intentional use that aligns with user stated goals. The formula factored in behaviors like searching for specific content, following educational accounts, and using creation tools. Passive infinite scrolling, especially past midnight, counted against the time well spent score. Here's the problem. TikTok knew the gap between these 2 numbers was enormous for teenage users. A slide deck from June 2022, presented to the company's trust and safety leadership, showed that among users aged 13 to 17, the average ratio of total time to time well spent was 4.7 to 1. That means for every hour a teen spent on TikTok in a way the company considered intentional and healthy, they spent nearly 5 hours in compulsive, passive scrolling. For adult users over 25, that ratio was 1.2 to 1, almost in balance. The deck included a breakdown by hour of day, and the worst ratios appeared between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., when over 70% of teen sessions were classified as low-intent scrolling. The presentation asked a direct question in the executive summary. Should we intervene when TST to TWS ratios exceed certain thresholds? TST is total session time. TWS is time well spent. The question was whether TikTok should build features to interrupt compulsive use when their own data showed it had crossed into unhealthy territory. The answer, documented in follow-up emails between VP-level executives, was no. One email from a product lead stated interventions at high TWS gaps would crater engagement metrics and create enforcement headaches. Recommendation is to hold and revisit if regulatory pressure increases. They knew, they measured it, they named it, and they decided the risk to revenue was not worth the fix. That email was written in July 2022, 14 months before the Kentucky lawsuit forced these documents into the public record. Now, you might be thinking, okay, they tracked some internal metrics and decided not to act. That's bad, but maybe it's just standard tech company rootlessness. But the documents show TikTok went further. They did not just fail to stop compulsive use, they researched how to deepen it. In April 2021, TikTok's algorithm team drafted a research proposal titled Optimizing for Flow State in Short-Form Video. The proposal cited academic literature on flow, a psychological concept describing deep immersion in an activity, and argued that inducing flow state would increase session length and next-day return rates. The document is striking because it explicitly connects the algorithm's goal to psychological research on how the brain loses track of time. One section reads, flow state is characterized by distorted time perception and reduced self-awareness. Users in flow report sessions feeling shorter than actual duration, which decreases guilt associated with extended use and increases likelihood of repeat behavior. The proposal outlined tests for 3 algorithm modifications. The first was reducing video length variance within a session to create rhythmic consistency. The second was front-loading each session with high engagement content to accelerate entry into flow. The third was suppressing exit cues like end-of-feed messages or suggested break prompts during detected flow states. All 3 modifications were designed around a single goal, making users lose track of how long they had been scrolling. According to a progress update from August 2021, all 3 modifications were implemented in the primary algorithm by midsummer. The research team celebrated this as a major win, but one researcher attached a note to the August update. It read, flow optimization shows strongest effects in under 18 demo. Effect size nearly double compared to adult cohorts. Possible concern if this surfaces in future litigation. That note was written in August 2021, more than 2 years before these documents became public. TikTok's own researchers were already thinking about how this would look in court. And they had reason to worry because TikTok was not just tracking behavioral addiction metrics, they were tracking mental health outcomes. In September 2022, TikTok's user research division completed an internal study titled Correlational Analysis of Platform Use Intensity and Self-Reported Well-Being in Teen Users. The study surveyed 5,000 users aged 13 to 17 across 6 countries, asking questions about sleep quality, anxiety levels, academic performance, and self-esteem. It also pulled back-end data on each user's session frequency, total daily minutes, and late-night usage patterns. The correlations were not subtle. Teens who used TikTok more than 3 hours per day reported significantly higher rates of sleep disruption, academic decline, and feelings of inadequacy compared to teens who used the app less than 90 minutes per day. The effect was dose-dependent. More use, worse outcomes. The study included a section on what researchers called comparison spiral, a pattern where users reported feeling worse about themselves after viewing content from creators with larger followings or more polished production value. According to the data, this effect was strongest in girls aged 13 to 15, and it intensified with longer session times. The report noted that the algorithm's tendency to show aspirational content, what internal docs called high production value lifestyle verticals, was a major driver. Teens were being fed a stream of content algorithmically selected to keep them watching, and that content was systematically making them feel inadequate. The study concluded with a recommendation: consider algorithmic adjustments to reduce HPC exposure in younger demos, particularly during extended sessions. HPC stood for high production content. The recommendation was to show teens less of the polished, aspirational content that made them feel bad but kept them scrolling. A margin note from the executive who reviewed the report read, "Not feasible. HPC drives highest engagement, tagging as backlog pending external pressure." Once again, TikTok identified the harm, measured it, and chose not to act. But what makes this even harder to defend is that they had already built the tools to fix it. They just refused to turn them on. Internal documentation from TikTok's Trust and Safety Engineering team shows that as early as December 2020, the company had developed a suite of features designed to interrupt compulsive use. These included session timers, late-night reminders, and a setting that would surface educational or calming content after the algorithm detected signs of a negative spiral. The features were fully built and tested internally. Some were even rolled out in limited international markets. But in the United States, where regulatory scrutiny was highest, they remained off by default. Why? Because another internal analysis, this one from the product team in May 2021, estimated that enabling these features by default for teen users would reduce daily active usage by 18% and average session length by 22%. The analysis included a revenue impact projection, approximately $430 million in annual ad revenue at risk if the features went live. A product VP responded to the analysis with a single line: "Unacceptable. These stay opt-in only unless legally compelled." Opt-in only is the key phrase. TikTok built the safety features, but they buried them in settings menus and required users to actively seek them out and enable them. Internal data showed that fewer than 2% of teen users ever turned on session limits, and fewer than 5% enabled late-night reminders. TikTok knew the features existed, they knew they worked, and they knew almost no one would find them unless the company made them visible. They chose invisibility. That decision is even more striking when you see what TikTok's legal team was preparing for. In June 2023, months before the Kentucky lawsuit, the company's general counsel circulated a memo titled Regulatory Risk Assessment, Youth Safety, and Platform Design. The memo outlined potential legal exposure in 3 areas: failure to warn, negligent design, and knowing infliction of harm. It specifically cited the internal research on addiction metrics and mental health outcomes as high-risk evidence in the event of litigation. The memo did not recommend pulling back on addictive features. Instead, it recommended strategies to mitigate legal exposure, including tighter control of internal communications, stronger arbitration clauses in terms of service, and preemptive lobbying to block state-level regulations. The legal team saw the lawsuit coming. They knew what the documents would show, and their response was not to change the product. It was to prepare the defense. What all of this reveals is not a story of a tech company making mistakes or moving fast and breaking things. It is a story of deliberate choices. TikTok built systems to measure addiction. They ran experiments to deepen it. They tracked the mental health fallout. They designed tools to reduce harm, and then hid them. And when their own lawyers warned them about liability, they lawyered up instead of changing course. This is not about whether social media can be addictive. We've known that for years. This is about what happens when a company has the receipts proving they engineered that addiction, targeted it at children, measured the harm, and kept going. The internal documents do not show ignorance. They show knowledge. They show intent. And they show a business model that required teen compulsive use to hit revenue targets, even when the company's own data said it was destroying mental health. The reason these documents matter is not just because they're a smoking gun in one lawsuit. They are a template for understanding how every platform makes these decisions. The metrics TikTok tracked, the A/B tests they ran, the features they built and buried, these are not unique to TikTok. Every major social platform has the same data. They all know the same things. What makes TikTok's case significant is that we now have proof of the internal logic. We can see exactly how a company weighs teen safety against engagement metrics. And the answer, at least in this case, is that safety loses every time until the lawsuit arrives.
There is a broader lesson here about the economics of attention. Platforms do not make money from time well spent. They make money from time spent, full stop. The algorithm does not care if you are learning something or spiraling into self-hatred. It cares if you are still watching. And when the users most vulnerable to compulsive behavior are also the most valuable to advertisers because they're forming lifelong habits and brands' loyalties, the incentive to protect them disappears. TikTok's documents lay that logic bare. They show a company that understood the harm and built it into the business model anyway. If you want to understand how digital platforms shape behavior, how algorithms exploit psychology, and how companies think about harm when it conflicts with growth, these documents are the key. This is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a much larger reckoning with what we've built and who it is designed to serve. And if you want to go deeper into how digital platforms engineer behavior and reshape culture, check out the Digital Deep Dives playlist. We've covered everything from algorithmic radicalization to the economics of influencer culture, and every video is built around the same principle: show the receipts and follow the incentives. The more you understand how these systems work, the harder it is to pretend they are accidents.